The sudden wealth of Mang Pedro. In the rolling hills of the countryside, wealth did not happen overnight. It was earned in inches, through blistered hands, long hours under a punishing sun, and generations of tending to the same stubborn soil. That was why the sudden rise of Mang Pedro set every tongue in the barrio wagging. For years, Pedro had been the poorest man in the village. His small plot of land was choked with rocks. His clothes were a patchwork of fading rags, and his face was deeply lined, with the exhaustion of a man who skipped meals so his children could eat. But within the span of a single month, everything changed. First, he bought the large, fertile rice field adjacent to his property, paying the owner in solid antique gold coins. Then, he hired a crew from the city to tear down his old bamboo hut and build a sprawling, two-story concrete house with a gleaming red roof. He wore fine linen shirts, bought a brand-new motorcycle, and his wife suddenly possessed heavy gold bracelets that clinked loudly whenever she walked through the market. He struck a vein of gold in the hills, the local farmers whispered over their morning coffee. He found a hidden treasure from the war, but those who lived closest to Pedro's new estate noticed a different kind of detail. They noticed that despite his immense wealth, Pedro looked more haggard than ever. Dark, hollow circles ringed his eyes, and he jumped at the slightest sound. More peculiar still was the new barn he had built at the very back of his property. It had no windows, a heavy iron door fastened with 3 thick padlocks, and a high concrete wall surrounding it. No one was ever allowed near it, not even the workers he hired to tend his fields. The uneasy prosperity of Pedro's family soon cast a dark shadow over the rest of the barrio. It began with a strange, oppressive scent that drifted from the back of Pedro's property whenever the wind shifted. It smelled like sulfur, sour milk, and wet, decaying fur. Then came the sounds in the dead of night. It wasn't a sound the villagers were used to. It wasn't the howl of a dog or the screech of an owl. It was a rhythmic, hollow thud-thud-thud, followed by a bizarre, flesh-on-flesh cracking noise, like 2 large, leathery ears violently clapping together. One night, a local youth named Cardo was walking home late after a festival in the next town. The moon was a sharp, silver crescent in the sky, casting long, distorted shadows across the dirt road. As Cardo approached the bend near Pedro's high concrete wall, he froze. A creature was stepping out from the tall grass, crossing the road in the moonlight. Cardo's breath caught in his throat. It looked roughly the size of a large goat, but its proportions were entirely wrong. Its hind legs were long, thick, and muscular, like those of a kangaroo, while its front legs were short and stunted. It possessed a long, hairless, whip-like tail that lashed at the air. But the most terrifying part was its posture. The creature was walking entirely backward. Its head was lowered completely between its hind legs, staring back at Cardo from underneath its own body with wide, glowing amber eyes that possessed no pupils. As Cardo watched, paralyzed by fear, the creature's massive, oversized ears suddenly flared out and clapped together with a loud, sharp smack. A wave of intense, nauseating heat radiated from the beast, carrying the scent of the grave. With a single, powerful leap of its massive hind legs, the creature vaulted effortlessly over Pedro's 10-foot concrete wall, vanishing into the darkness of the compound. Within weeks, a chilling terror gripped the barrio. The Sigbin was no longer content with staying hidden within the walls of its master's estate. It was hungry, and its hunger required a specific, horrific price. First, the livestock began to disappear. Pigs were found dead in their pens, completely untouched except for a clean, jagged tear over their chests. When the farmers examined the wounds, they discovered that the animals' hearts had been precisely, violently torn out. But a Sigbin cannot be sustained by the blood of beasts for long. The gold it brought to its master required a much darker currency, and the entity was growing restless in the dark. On a rainy Tuesday, the horror truly arrived when a 7-year-old boy named Lito went missing on his walk home from school. The entire village mobilized, searching the rivers, the muddy ravines, and the thick jungle with torches. By the 3rd day, they found him in a ravine just outside Pedro's land. Beneath his torn shirt lay the unmistakable jagged wound over his chest. His heart was gone. The grief that shattered the village quickly turned into a cold, burning rage. Cardo stepped forward, telling the village elders what he had seen. That night on the road, the backward monster that lived inside Pedro's locked compound. The gold, the village elder said, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and horror. Pedro didn't find a treasure. He made a pact. He keeps a Sigbin, and now the beast is collecting its rent. The confrontation at the barn. That very night, under the cover of a pitch-black sky, a group of 5 men from the village, armed with machetes, heavy iron crowbars, and containers of kerosene, crept onto Pedro's property. Cardo led the way, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. They bypassed the main house, where the lights were completely out, and made their way straight to the windowless concrete barn at the back. As they approached, the air grew thick and heavy, burning the back of their throats with the stench of rot. From inside the structure, they could hear a low, wet chewing sound, accompanied by the occasional, eerie clack of leathery ears. "Get the crowbars," Cardo whispered, his hands shaking. 2 of the strongest men jammed their iron bars into the gap between the heavy door and the frame. With a collective, breathless heave, they strained against the metal. The padlocks groaned, the iron screeched, and with a loud, echoing snap, the door burst open. The beam of Cardo's flashlight cut through the pitch darkness of the barn. Sitting in the center of the concrete floor, surrounded by a mountain of glittering gold coins and ancient jewelry, was the Sigbin. It was tearing into the fresh remains of a missing village hound. At the sound of the door opening, it slowly swiveled its backward head, its glowing amber eyes locking onto the men. Suddenly, a voice screamed from the dark. "No, don't hurt it. It will ruin me." Pedro rushed into the barn from a side door, his face pale, his clothes disheveled. He threw himself in front of the creature, shielding it with his own body. "You fool!" Cardo yelled. "It killed Lito. It's killing our children for this garbage." The Sigbin, agitated by the shouting and the bright flashlights, let out a high-pitched metallic hiss. It didn't care about its master. Sensing the danger, the creature's long, whip-like tail lashed out, striking Pedro across the chest and sending him crashing into the pile of gold coins. The ashes of wealth. With a terrifying backward spring, the Sigbin lunged at the village men, but they were ready. One of the farmers stepped forward, hurling a large glass jar of kerosene directly at the creature's hairy torso. The glass shattered, drenching the beast in the flammable oil. Before the monster could leap again, Cardo struck a match and tossed it forward. Whoosh! The barn erupted into a violent, roaring wall of bright orange flame. The Sigbin let out a horrific, unnatural scream, a sound like a screeching metal saw, as the fire consumed its coarse, oily fur. It thrashed wildly, its massive hind legs kicking at the air, scattering burning gold coins across the concrete floor. The creature tried to sprint out of the open door, but the men stood their ground, raising their heavy machetes. Weakened by the fire, the monster collapsed onto the burning floor, its massive ears clapping weakly one last time before it fell completely still, melting into a pool of thick black grease. Pedro watched from the corner, weeping hysterically as the fire began to spread to the walls. But as the Sigbin drew its final breath, a strange phenomenon occurred. The massive pile of gold coins and jewelry began to smoke. Right before the eyes of the horrified men, the glittering metal started to blacken, wither, and lose its luster. Within seconds, the gold disintegrated, turning into nothing more than mounds of worthless, dry charcoal and decaying leaves. The illusion of the pact was broken. The men dragged a screaming, broken Pedro out of the burning structure just before the roof collapsed, burying the remains of the monster and the ashes of his false wealth. The concrete barn burned to the ground, leaving behind only a scorched, black scar on the earth where nothing would ever grow again. Pedro lost his mind that night. He spent the rest of his days wandering the gravel roads of the province, his pockets filled with dry leaves, muttering to himself about a shadow that walked backward. His grand concrete house was abandoned, slowly swallowed up by the creeping jungle vines until it became just another cautionary landmark for the locals. To this day, the people of the rural barrios keep a close eye on anyone who gains fortune too quickly. And if you ever find yourself walking down a dark country lane at night, and you smell the sudden sour scent of sulfur, do not look down between your legs, because some shadows are looking right back at you.